The walls that have protected the world for 1,000 years are trembling. With each shot, stones the size of carts fly through the air and explode against blocks that have withstood 23 sieges. But this time, something is different. This time, physics has changed. April 6, 1453. 100,000 men camp before Constantinople. Inside, 7,000 soldiers observe the horizon and see cannons larger than anything ever built. The distance between the two sides is not merely military, it is technological. And when technology becomes a weapon, entire empires cease to make sense. This is the story of how a city that connected 3 continents, preserved libraries that held 2 millennia of knowledge, and defined what it meant to be Christian in the East, ceased to exist in 53 days. But it's not just about battle. It's about the moment when the medieval world realizes that its fundamental structures no longer work. Because Constantinople doesn't fall because of weakness. It falls because the world around it has transformed. What you're about to see is how an invincible defense system becomes obsolete in a generation. How an economy based on route control collapses when new routes emerge. And how the fall of a city redistributes power, knowledge, and faith throughout the Mediterranean in ways no one planned. Let's start from the ground up. Constantinople has existed for 1,123 years. It was founded by Constantine as the new Roman capital, survived the fall of Rome, and withstood Persians, Arabs, Bulgarians, and Crusaders. Its triple walls, built in the 5th century, have never been breached by brute force. The city controls the strait that separates Europe from Asia. Whoever dominates Constantinople charges a toll on trade between East and West. That's why it's rich. That's why it's a target. But in 1453, Constantinople is a shadow of its former self. The empire that once ruled from Egypt to the Balkans now controls only the city and some isolated territories in Greece. The population has fallen from 500,000 to about 50,000 inhabitants. Entire neighborhoods are abandoned. Churches crumble. Emperor Constantine V governs a capital without an empire. And then Mehmed II appears, 21 years old, the 3rd Ottoman Sultan in 30 years. His father abdicated, returned, and died. Mehmed inherits an unstable empire and an obsession to take Constantinople, not for wealth, for legitimacy. Because in the Eastern Mediterranean, whoever conquers Rome from the East becomes heir to Rome, and heir to Rome rules the world. At first glance, it seems impossible. Constantinople has resisted for centuries precisely because its walls make any siege unfeasible. But Mehmed will not besiege in the old style. He hires Orban, a Hungarian engineer who designs cannons larger than anything ever seen. The largest of them is 8 meters long and fires projectiles weighing 600 kilograms. To transport it from Adrianople to Constantinople, 60 oxen pull the structure for 2 months. Entire roads need to be reinforced. From this point on, war becomes engineering. The problem is no longer courage or the number of soldiers. It's firepower against structural resistance. And when walls encounter cannons of this scale, the age-old advantage of defense vanishes. April 2nd, the Ottoman fleet blocks the sea. April 6th, the cannons begin firing. Constantine XI has 7,000 defenders. Mehmed has 100,000 attackers, plus the largest artillery ever assembled. But the city still trusts in its walls. They have 3 lines. The outer one is 12 meters high and 5 meters thick. Even cracking, they seem to hold. But each shot doesn't just shatter stone, it shatters morale. The city's inhabitants awaken to the sound of explosions shaking the ground. Children cover their ears. Women pray in churches while stone dust falls on the altars. Soldiers rush to repair holes in the walls during the night, but in the morning new shots destroy their work. The city breathes dust and blood. Mehmed attempts a general assault on April 18th. He fails. The walls still hold. But then, he does something unexpected. He transports 70 ships overland. He builds a mile-long wooden road, lubricates it with animal tallow, and drags the boats over the Galata Hills to the Golden Horn, Constantinople's natural harbor, which was protected by a giant current. Suddenly, the city is surrounded from the north as well. The geographical advantage that had protected it for centuries ceases to exist. We were completely surrounded, but we paid with accelerated hunger, because now no aid ships can enter. Genoa promised reinforcements. Venice promised a fleet. Nothing arrives. The city is alone. May 22nd, Mehmed offers surrender. Constantine refuses, not because he believes he will win, but because surrendering Constantinople is surrendering a thousand-year-old identity. It is accepting that Eastern Christianity has lost its capital. It is betraying all the emperors who have protected those walls since Constantine I. For the emperor, the choice is not between life and death. It is between existing defeated or disappearing with dignity. May 28th, the eve of the final day. Constantine gathers the defenders in the Hagia Sophia Cathedral. Greek Orthodox and Latin Catholics pray together for the first time in decades. The religious schism that divided Christendom for 400 years dissolves for a few hours. Everyone knows that tomorrow is the end. May 29th, 1 o'clock in the morning. Mehmed launches the final attack. Successive waves of soldiers climb ladders, fall, are replaced. The outer wall is ruined. The second line holds. But then, by chance or strategy, a small gate called Kirkoporta is left ajar. 50 janissaries enter. They climb the wall. They raise the Ottoman flag. The defenders see the flag and think the city has already fallen. Panic spreads faster than any order could be given. Constantine XI removes his imperial insignia, throws himself into the last line of battle, and disappears. His body is never found. The last Roman emperor dies as an anonymous soldier. Until noon, Constantinople is Ottoman. Mehmed rides in along Via Mese, the main avenue that has crossed the city since the time of Constantine I. He stops at the Hagia Sophia Cathedral. He orders it to be converted into a mosque. He ascends to the altar, gazes at the giant dome covered in golden mosaics, and utters a phrase that will be repeated for centuries. The spider weaves its web in the palace of the Caesars. 3 days of looting. That's the rule. Whoever takes a city by assault is entitled to 3 days. Houses are invaded. Libraries are burned or looted. Christian relics become spoils of war. But Mehmed also protects some of the knowledge. He orders that Greek manuscripts be preserved. He appoints a new Orthodox patriarch. He allows Christians to continue living in the city, but now as dhimmi-protected second-class citizens. The city changes its name, not officially but in usage. Constantinople becomes Istanbul. The Ottoman capital moves from Adrianople to there. The empire that was Asian becomes European. The political geography of the Eastern Mediterranean is reorganized around a new power, and the impact goes beyond borders. Greek scholars flee to Italy, taking ancient manuscripts with them. These texts fuel the Renaissance. European universities begin teaching classical Greek. Plato and Aristotle, preserved by Byzantium, now circulate in Florence, Venice, and Paris. The fall of Constantinople redistributes classical knowledge throughout the West. At the same time, trade routes change. Constantinople controlled the land route to Asia. Now that the Ottomans dominate, prices rise. European merchants seek alternatives. Portugal invests in Atlantic navigation. Spain finances Columbus. The search for new routes to India bypassing the Ottoman Empire leads to the Age of Discovery. The fall of a city pushes Europe towards the ocean. But there is an invisible cost. Constantinople was the last great center of Eastern Christianity resisting the Islamic advance. Its fall changes the balance of religious power. The Pope in Rome loses the rival who, even in schism, represented half of Christendom. Moscow begins to see itself as the Third Rome, heir to Byzantium. This concept fuels Russian expansionism for the next 500 years. Within the city, the transformation is physical. Mosques replace churches, Christian neighborhoods shrink. Turkish, Armenian, Jewish and Greek populations coexist under a new order. Istanbul becomes a mosaic of cultures, but always with a clear hierarchy. Muslims at the top, Christians and Jews below, slaves at the bottom. Mehmed's promise was to create a new Rome, and in a way he fulfills it. Istanbul becomes an imperial center that lasts for another 400 years. But the Rome he creates is not a continuation, it is a replacement. Because when Constantinople falls, it is not just a dynasty that ends, it is a world model. The empire that preserved Roman legacy, Eastern Christianity, and Greek culture for 1,000 years ceases to exist. What comes after is powerful, but it is something else. History teaches us that empires don't fall solely due to internal weakness. They fall when the world around them changes faster than they can adapt. Constantinople withstood enemies for centuries because its walls were cutting-edge technology. But when technology evolves into 600-kilogram cannons, walls become archaeology. The city that defended itself with 5th-century structures faced 15th-century artillery. The difference was fatal. The fall of Constantinople marks the transition between two eras. The Middle Ages die there in the cracked walls, with the last emperor gone in the manuscripts taken to the west. What emerges afterward is a world of oceanic empires, centralized states, religious reforms, and science based on rediscovered classical texts. 1,000 years of empire ended in 53 days. But what those 1,000 years created, libraries, laws, theology, art, continued to spread for centuries. Constantinople fell, Byzantium died, but the knowledge it preserved shaped the modern world in ways Mehmed never imagined. If you want to continue exploring how major historical events transformed entire structures of civilization, subscribe to the channel. Every week a new documentary about the moments when history became something else.